Hola y bienvenido. Hello and welcome to Thursdays for the Soul on this day, March 3rd, 2022, 3322. Thursdays for the Soul is a webinar series for the whole church. We faithfully focus on care and education for the people of God and create opportunities to digitally worship together as the whole United Church of Christ. From prayer, music, and psalms to interviews of key leaders and how-tos in congregational life, this series stays current to the relevant topics of the time and offers opportunities of connection in the wider church and in your community. Together we can bring our church and the world towards the world God imagines all of us to be for all of us. Buen dia. I am Reverend Roberto Ochoa, the Associate for Congregations of Color and Ethnic Identified Congregations within the Justice and Local Church Ministries of the United Church of Christ, and your host and moderator for your program today. In presenting this program, we are aware of the global backdrop which is playing out at this very moment. We lift up our hearts and prayers to the people of the nation of Ukraine as they fight to keep their liberty from an aggressive force. We lift up the world today, praying for peace and justice for all of God's creation. Gracias for joining us for this hour of hope and faith. We are so pleased to present today the rural and small town voices of praise and reflection of the United Church of Christ. We have congregational leaders and pastors across the denomination joining us today, and we have this amazing and superb panel joining us. But before we get to today's session, let me tell you about what we have up next in this series. On Thursday, March 10th, we present Midwifing Grief. Reverend Jamie E. Eddy, a pastoral theologian, spiritual care practitioner, loss navigation specialist, and death midwife, will offer key strategies for individuals and communities in moving forward with grace and care for each other, navigating through collective trauma and change. We invite everyone to this special hour of possible pathways to healing for all of us in the church and the communities we live in. And on Thursday, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, we offer Contemplatives in Action, Mindfulness in the United Church of Christ. Following a resolution on contemplative inaction, passed in the 2021 General Synod, a working group of clergy, students, and lay leaders have been meeting regularly to pray and meditate on how to incorporate more contemplative practices into our UCC communities. The Christian tradition is rich with stories from those with direct experiences of the Holy Spirit, but many find the more exotic side of spirituality to be intimidating or inaccessible. We invite you as practitioners tell us that there is so much more to meditation than silence. Be prepared for a mind-expanding experience. All our Thursdays for the Soul Digital Programs begin at 10:30 a.m. Hawaiian time, 12:30 Pacific, 1:30 Mountain, 2:30 Central, and 3:30 p.m. Eastern times. And if these hours inspire you in any way, and you would like to continue supporting ministries like this, consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. That's texting UCC to 41444. Now for our program today. Rural and small town congregations are the heartbeat of the United Church of Christ. Over 50% of UCC congregations are in what is considered rural and small town identified settings. Today we will hear rural identified congregational leaders' voice and reflect the celebrations and challenges of doing God's work in their communities in 2022. We all know that the past 2 years have been really challenging ones for all over the world and all over our cities and all over our communities. So how are our rural congregations doing? and what is their future looking like. So we're looking forward to hearing from our leaders today. So it is my honor and privilege to introduce to you our extraordinary panel of servants of God. The first person I'd love to introduce is Reverend Barbara Rowlett, who is a pastor of Dill Parish, UCC in Reyesville, Pennsylvania. How you doing, Reverend Barbara?
Hello, sir. I'm happy to be here. It is Larraysville, PA.
Larraysville, PA.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. So good to have you with us today. And so from Montana, we have Ms. Trudy Downer, who's the moderator of Congregational Church at UCC of Malt, and the pastor there is Reverend Jim Smith. They're both with us today. How are you doing, Trudy?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Glad to see you. Reverend Jim, how are you doing? I can assure you, Reverend Jim is with us today. So
I'm doing great, and I think we should need to make Trudy our our associate pastor up there, because she takes on a lot of the pastoral work since I'm part-time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and I'm glad you're with us. So out in Absaroki, I knew I was going to mess this up. Community Congregation Church in Absaroki, Montana. Pastor Meg Hatch, how are you today?
Great. Your pronunciation is golden. Don't worry.
But you're so kind, and thank you so much for being with us today. And out in Pennsylvania, we have Reverend Amelia Price, pastor of St. Paul's. How are you doing?
Doing well. Glad to be here.
And that's Selinsgrove, PA? Selinsgrove?
Selinsgrove, PA.
Selinsgrove, PA. Thank you. And in South Dakota, a dear friend of mine, Ms. Becky Leonard, who is an administrative assistant and member of First Congregational Church there. How are you today, Becky?
I'm doing great. Thank you for inviting me today.
I'm glad you're with us today. And going down south to North Dakota, not North Dakota, I'm kidding, North Carolina, Reverend Eddie Weathers, who serves as the Associate Conference Minister working in the Eastern North Carolina Association of the Southern Conference of the UCC. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, and I'm doing better than I deserve in this 76-degree weather today.
Oh, okay. Rub that in. Rub it in. We're 30 degrees up here in Massachusetts. Okay, thank you. And talking about up here, Nicole, how are you doing, Reverend Amanda Sawyer, who is pastor of North Bromford Congregational Church, UCC in North Bromford, Vermont?
I'm great and glad to be with this group of folks from all over. What a joy.
And it's a joy to have you all. So we're so glad to see you all. So why don't we just go right into it? I'm going to call on my dear friend, Becky Leonard. How are things in South Dakota? And share with us the ministry going on up there. I'm sorry, Becky, would you like to unmute yourself? Becky, how about unmuting yourself?
I'm sorry, I thought I hit that.
That's okay. Okay, you gotta love live TV, right?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Roberto. As said, I am a member of the First Congregational United Church of Christ in Redfield, South Dakota. Today, as we celebrate rural ministries, I hope to give you a glimpse into our church life right now. Found in the central part of South Dakota, we are 175 miles from Sioux Falls, our largest city in the state. We are surrounded by farmland and ranches. Our population is about 2,100 people according to the latest census. This is a decrease from 2010 when we had about 2,300 people. While we do have more on our membership rolls, I would say we have about 150 members that are active in our church. Our average attendance in Sunday worship services has been around 45 people lately. Pre-COVID, our numbers were closer to an average of 75 during this time of year. So we really haven't bounced back after COVID yet. But we do have many members that watch our stream services. COVID sparked our move to more sophisticated technology so we could reach people who were unable to attend services in person. Videos of our services are available on YouTube. One of our unique ministries is that we have 2 nonprofit apartment buildings for people that are aged 55 or older or disabled. A board consisting of members from our local church and members from another UCC church 10 miles away oversees the management of these apartment buildings. Since our community has a large elderly population and our church membership is also on the older side, we feel it is important to have accessible housing available for our community. These apartment buildings also have community rooms that encourage socialization, which has been so important during these isolating times. Another ministry dear to our hearts is supporting our local food pantry with food and help. Our county has been identified as a food desert. While Redfield has 1 grocery store and a Dollar General, its food prices can be quite a bit higher than we find in more populated areas. Many people shop for groceries whenever they are in one of our larger surrounding towns. Our closest larger community with stores such as Walmart and Target is Aberdeen, South Dakota, which is 45 miles away. For our low-income people and people on fixed budgets, this is a difficult situation. They spend a larger percentage of their income on food and are not able to easily travel out of town for lower-priced groceries. This is why our food pantry is so needed. We have a monthly mobile food pantry truck that comes to town from Feeding South Dakota also. Feeding South Dakota is a hunger relief organization and food bank that partners with Feed America. When the truck comes, some of our members, along with other people from the community, have helped unload and hand out fresh and frozen produce, dairy, meats, breads, and non-perishable items. A backpack program at the Redfield School has also been a project we have assisted with. This program makes sure that youth who might otherwise go hungry have food over the weekend. In Redfield, we have a very strong ecumenical ministerial association. There are 13 area churches in a 20-mile radius in Redfield, and 9 of these churches are very active in the association. In a small town, it is important that we work together to meet the needs of our community. Through this association, the churches are able to pool their resources to help those in need locally, as well as transients who come through town. Our children's ministry is important to our whole church. We have Faithful Learning on Wednesdays, or abbreviated, we call it FLOW, which is our Christian education for the children and youth of our church. A challenge we've been seeing lately is the decline in numbers in this ministry, as we don't have as many families with young children as we used to. We see our young people leave for higher education, and many don't choose to come back to the community to raise a family. We do have a strong connection to the outdoor ministry of Placerville Camp, located in the Black Hills of South Dakota. We have a camp fund that makes it possible for youth to attend this life-changing ministry. It is very well supported by our members. I feel one of our biggest strengths is how generous our members are and how fast they can help out when a specific need arises. One example of this is that we had a transient come through recently, and he came to our church for help because he was falling through the cracks in our ministerial association's ability to help him. It was very cold out, and he needed lodging and was not dressed at all for the weather. With a couple calls and an email, we had lodging lined up for him until his ride came a few days later, and warm clothes for him in a very short amount of time. We also see this generosity whenever needs arise at our sister church, Virgin Creek UCC of the Dakota Association. This church is on the Cheyenne River Indian Reservation. When they see a need for food and clothing, we always have a strong response from our members. One winter, someone stole their wood-burning stove from their meeting house, and they were unable to hold worship services. Our women's fellowship found out about their hardship and was able to help them get a replacement wood stove in time for Christmas Eve services. One big challenge we've been facing lately has been that we have been without a minister since July of 2020. We are one of several churches in our association that is looking for a full-time minister. Finding pastors willing to do rural ministry can certainly be difficult. We sure hope that we find someone soon, but we wait for God's timing on this. Another challenge that COVID brought on is the fact that we have not had fellowship meals since COVID began. Meals and fellowship are such a large part of our community that we really have been missing them. We have been able to start coffee fellowship before church, and that has been a large blessing for our older members to alleviate feelings of isolation. All in all, I would say we have a close-knit church family that has been surviving the challenges of COVID and not having ministerial leadership. Thank you for letting me share some of the joys and challenges in our rural ministry.
And thank you, Becky, for bringing up to voice of the many joys and celebrations as well as challenges that your congregation is. And I also saying that I'm very appreciative that you are a great example of the strength of lay leadership within your congregation, your community. So thank you so much, Becky, for sharing the narrative out in your area, in your community, out in Redfield, South Dakota. I promise to visit, I really did. Going now to Montana, I have Pastor May.
Hello, Becky, thank you for all of that. Your situation sounds so similar to ours, except you're a little bigger, but I don't have any particular wisdom about how to serve small rural churches, but I have a wonderful congregation, so I would like to just share a little bit about it. I began ordained ministry serving a congregation full of stockbrokers and bond traders in New York City. So if you had told me 30 years ago that I would end up amid cattle ranchers and miners in a county in Montana with no stoplights, where 2/3 of our roads are unpaved, I probably would not have believed you. But here I am. And as attuned as I am to the church year, you know, Advent, Christmas, Epiphany, blah, 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 I learned quickly in this setting that there are different seasons shaping our life together here. Here there is calving season, lambing season, branding season. Look up Rocky Mountain oysters if you don't know what those are. Haying season, county fair season, and then grandchild season overlaps the last two of those when the grandchildren from urban and suburban areas come out to spend time on the ranch. Our church building is the charming classic, here's the church, here's the steeple, white clapboard building with stained glass windows. But when you open the doors to see all the people, what you will see is people who grew up here and then went away and had successful careers and then returned, maybe for the fly fishing, but especially because this feels like home to them. You will see multi-generational families with the ray of sunshine cowgirl drawing pictures and passing one down the pew to her grandfather, then handing another one back to the pew behind her to her great-grandmother, and then showing another one to the camera for her uncle who is zooming in from the West Coast. One year I had sets of cousins light the Advent candles together, and people who were newer to the church were surprised to learn how many people were cousins. Among the older generations in our congregation, most people are in fact related to each other one way or another by blood or marriage, or at least they went to school together. And so what that means is that many of my people have had decades of experience living together as a community, getting into fights, hurting each other's feelings, offending each other, but then forgiving each other, and all the while showing up on Sunday mornings to sit in pews near each other. It is hard to pretend to be anything you're not when you are with people who have known you your whole entire life and put up with you and loved you the whole time. You will also, in my congregation, see the entire political spectrum represented. And it's a small congregation, so that gets a little sticky sometimes, but we have mostly managed to remain in community and treat each other with love and respect, mostly. I do have to say that out loud every now and then to remind us. You will not see in our congregation the critical mass of children you would need to run the kind of youth program that the evangelical church down the street has. But our kids know they are dearly loved for exactly who they are. For instance, my daughter this year started her college application essay by describing the ways this congregation has provided very rich soil for her to grow in. So all of that brings me to some of the qualities that I think are most valued in this setting. A strong work ethic and perseverance are crucial. Even if it's 25 degrees below zero, you still have to make sure that your animals are fed and watered and safe. So we have no snow days here because we would be closed half the time. You just get some good snow tires or chains, you pull on your muck boots and you get going. Similar to what Becky said, the generosity, mostly anonymous, that I see in this congregation is astonishing. I trace some of that to the fact that when wildfires come up, there is no time to wait for highly trained fire professionals from elsewhere to get here. All of the neighboring ranchers have to work together to put out the flames. The food bank that our church started just a few years ago is regularly stocked with hundreds of pounds of donated local beef. And the food that does have to be purchased is well funded by all of our area churches, as well as by countless non-church goers in the area. Now, as someone mentioned in an earlier webinar, food is really important. Whether it's the food we deliver to each other after surgery, or the soup and pie we always share on the first Sunday of Advent, or the green eggs and ham we're about to have in a couple of weeks, close to St. Patrick's Day. Like all congregations, we take advantage of any opportunity to eat together. So there is not much need for fancy packaging or flashy marketing in what we do. Show up, get real, be honest. Why do any of the words I speak from the pulpit matter? What difference will the hymns we sing or the scripture we hear make as we are all trying to get through the next week? Those are questions I ask myself over and over. So even though there are some unique and wonderful blessings and challenges in small rural congregations, the truth is that our need for meaning and purpose and belonging and community and hope is the same as it is in any church. Thanks.
Beautifully, beautifully said, Pastor Meg. Thank you. Thank you so much. They're really blessed to have you there. And it sounds that the community has been a blessing for you. And moving on to Montana, staying in Montana, we have Miss Trudy Downer, and as well as Reverend Jim Smith from Congregational Church in Malt. Am I pronouncing that right?
Molt, just like the ducks do. Okay. I might preface by the fact that we celebrated our 100th birthday as a church with a new pastor and immediately went into COVID isolation. So it took us another year before we were able to have a public celebration of our church. Jim, do you want to unmute yourself?
I was going to let you go first anyway. So.
All right. Well, I'll give you a little bit of background about our church. We are a very, very small community. We're in the same county as Absaroka, and there's a third UCC church in our county, all three small rural churches. Molt is the smallest of the three. We're the closest to Billings, our largest community. We're a rural agricultural community. But like so much of rural America, the things that seem to define community are disappearing in our area. We just had to close our school. We have 3 years to decide if our school is viable. So we have a lack of young families. We have very little business. Basically, we have an elevator for our grain farmers, a post office, and our rural fire department. We were excited when areas outside of some of the cities around us were having subdivisions coming out our way, thinking that maybe it would define and help our congregation to grow. But we found very quickly that the only thing that we had in common were the fire department and the post office. The folks that want to live in a rural area, live in the country, work in the city, go to church in the city, center their lives in the city. So that basically they're not members of the community. So we have an original agricultural community and then people that have some ties to our community. Our church has changed a lot over the 44 years that I've been a member. We had lots of young families and a full Sunday school and a youth group and lots of activities within our church. But as we have aged, farms can't support multi-generations anymore. So the youth are leaving and the farms are being sold because there's no one to operate them. For us, it's been hard to define ourselves as a church. We have to stay away from defining the church as how many people sit in the pews on Sunday morning, because what we do after we get the nurture on Sunday morning, all the rest of the week is far more important. So when we talked to the conference and started building a profile, they sent us Pastor Jim to help us to define ourselves and maybe find a new niche where we can help our community. Jim?
I walked into the Molt congregation after a really wonderful guy, pastor, had been there for 15 years. And I thought, okay, how's this going to work out now? Because I'm a city boy. I grew up in Baltimore. Started my first parish as a Lutheran pastor in 1,500 member church in Tucson. But my next congregation of my own was in Indiana as a mission pastor for the Lutherans in Princeton, Indiana. And from there on, I've kind of been in small churches and in churches that we would call rural. And by rural, I mean those of us who are out in the sticks, okay? Not necessarily in a thriving community like Absaroka of Sorky. But when I go into a congregation, I usually just shut up and listen for a while and see what's going on. And what I was hearing was, Pastor, we don't know, we got to get in new members. We need that new blood. And as I said the other day, I felt like it was in with a bunch of Christian vampires. And I pointed that out. And I think maybe it took hold because our emphasis now, and has been somewhat getting larger since we started thinking this way, is what can we do to go out to the people that Trudy just mentioned? Not necessarily to bring them in, but to meet a need that they might have. We're scratching our heads trying to figure out what these people need. And we came up with something that I think has been very healthy and I have a lot of fun. I'm a bluegrass picker, okay? Pickers are people who play music. We started out by having what do you call it? What was it called? I can never remember, Cheryl.
We had for years we had a cafe
Yeah.
in town, Prairie Winds, and they had live bluegrass music on Saturday mornings. And so to celebrate our 100th, we had a bluegrass festival called Prairie Winds Revisited. And our men cooked, our women served, and we had over 100 people come and enjoy the music.
Yeah.
And
I got to play some music, and that was wonderful. But since then, we have let it be known that we will, as the weather changes, and then, like Meg said, our seasons are dictated by a lot of other things other than calendars, sports for one, and weather for the other. And so, as soon as the weather breaks, we have plans for doing another one before we close down for the summer, which is something I had to get used to. Trudy can explain that better than I can. But we go about 9 months of the year, and then we close for the summer.
we do that. We, for years, only worshiped every other Sunday, and not this summer to match the agriculture. And then we found a pastor come that was willing to experiment with us, and we were able to expand to every Sunday worship during the school year. And then when the offerings and everything would decline, then we take time off with little gatherings to connect. But it makes it so that we can afford to keep our doors open every Sunday.
So I get a summer sabbatical every year of sorts. But this is
And I don't have to type the bulletin.
Well, I send you the bulletin from my previous parish, and we'll copy them. Anyway, what I see as having served several rural churches over the years, it isn't what you have or don't have. It's more what you can do with what you've got. And I call it potential. What do we have as potential beyond what we have as problems? And I think that's kind of the direction we're heading now, trying to find out what can we do for the people, the new people, but the old people too, the seniors. A lot of seniors in our community. And that's the direction we're heading.
And Pastor Jim and Trudy, for the minute that we have left, what would you like the wider church to know about MOLT, Congregational Church in Malt?
I think it's a matter of understanding that agriculture is a way of life and it's changing, and we don't want our ground to be under houses. We want to keep agriculture, and that's what our church needs to.
I would add this. It would be great if Robert, if you could come out and visit and see what it's like driving 20 miles to church every morning or longer for some of our people. And in a way, we're isolated and we depend on our vehicles to get us to stores and doctor's appointments and what have you. And that puts a pressure on how much we can do. But what I see in the congregation is warms my heart is we're still doing. And we're still looking for something more that we can do.
And we've been hooked up to Zoom, which most of our members never dreamed of. So
that's because Trudy is the residential tech. When I have a problem with my computer, I call her.
Every church needs a techie.
Yeah, you got it. I'm married to a tech. If I can't get hold of Trudy, I talk to my wife.
Well, thank you so much. I'd be honored to go visit you all. You know, I really would. So Miss Trudy and Reverend Jim, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Stories. Now we're going to head down south to the Southern Conference, where we have Reverend Eddie Weathers, who is the Associate Conference Minister. And he's been on here before, and I'm welcome back, Reverend Eddie.
Thank you, Roberto. I'm delighted to be here today and to hear some of the challenges that others are having. I find them very similar to what is occurring here in the Southern Conference. You know, North Carolina is a large state. The Southern Conference encompasses 3 associations: the Western, the Eastern, and Eastern Virginia. I fortunately have the largest association in the Southern Conference. And I think over the UCC, we might have our association might be as large as some conferences. We have somewhere between 60 and 80 churches in this association with various needs and we have stopped calling them challenges, but we're calling them ministry opportunities, where we have opportunity to minister to churches. One of the things we did utilize that I think that was very important for all of the churches in the association is some years ago, we utilized thing that was called Mission Insight that did the demographics around the church. And I think it was very helpful for a number of our churches, especially for those who used it. Now, most of our churches, if you could cut North Carolina in half from Burlington to the Outer Banks, that is the territory for the Eastern North Carolina Association. We are heavily populated with, I think, the largest Afro-American congregations in the United Church of Christ. I think about 80, I would say 80% of the churches that are here are not only rural, but they're Afro-American. I think it came from the stream of congregational Christians, which joined the United Church of Christ. And I think that might be the reason we are so heavily populated with the Afro-American churches here. 2005, we lost a number of our churches over the issue of O&A, but we have since that time sort of recovered. And I think with the challenges or opportunities that have come this way through COVID, we really were able to see the resilience of churches, especially in the rural. One of the problems here in North Carolina that we had, especially in the eastern part of the state, was broadband. And fortunately, we are getting broadband. And I think that one of the reasons is because of our governor that is here and the opportunities that he has provided for, particularly the eastern part of the state where that was very badly needed. So as a good thing for North Carolina, we were able, many of our rural churches had no idea about Zoom or Facebook or any of those type of mechanisms. But since COVID came, it opened up with the broadband, it opened up many of our churches to have Zoom, to have Facebook Live. And so as our churches now have beginning to go back into live worship, many of them are still using those mechanisms. Now, the good thing about that is that there are more people attending church through Zoom than there was post-COVID. There might have been, and I heard some of the statistical matter that there were those who, one of our churches who were having maybe 100 on Sunday. Now that we have live worship, now they have about 75 in church and about 400 in Zoom and Facebook Live, which in turn has really been good for a number of our rural churches because fortunately giving is way up. We're seeing that in our association. Churches are being generous with our association, not only being generous with our association, they're being generous with their own congregations. I've had opportunities to burn mortgages, several of them since COVID, which is probably maybe not been heard of. But our churches have been generous in giving, and what we have been targeting is to educate, to equip and empower all of our congregations. And in that effort, what we have done, and Dr. Davis under his great leadership, and you all might know Reverend Dr. Smith Davis, Edward Smith Davis, who has really done a wonderful job with this conference and has turned many of the things around. What we are advocating and our thrust is now is to educate, equip, and empower. And we are doing that in a number of ways. We are now having a racial equality that is led by the Reverend Dr. John Myers in the West Virginia Association. He is doing a wonderful job. We're also partnering with the Disciples of Christ. And those who have attended, we had something like 300 people to attend our sessions. They received certificates, and I think that is going well. The other thing that I'm excited about, and that, and I don't know exactly how I got it, but must have been the movement of the Spirit. I'm now the Southern Conference Coordinator for Disaster, and I'm working with Leslie. We are also excited about that because we are developing now where all of our churches can have a church profile so that they can be ready for any kind of disaster and to know what to do while there are bright days. So I'm excited about that program. You all will probably be hearing about that pretty soon, about a church profile and ways that the area, especially when they have experienced a disaster, where they can get mental help, where they can get funds that are available for long-term recovery. And we have utilized them. Somebody mentioned food desert. Since that time, we have been able, through hope, to be rewarded with a 7,000 scholarship for one of our congregations with a food bank who has gotten a freezer. and now we're serving at least 500 people every week. And we have some good food banks throughout the Eastern North Carolina Association. The third thing that I want to share with you is that many of you might know Ali Bratson, who also works with the National Church with Health and Wellness. We are launching health and wellness where all of our churches, we want to get the sick list down. And so what we have done is Ali is helping us to disseminate health, eating healthy and living healthy. And every week something comes out in the newsletter, and those articles will be dispensed by someone in every congregation of the Eastern North Carolina Association, hopefully the conference, where we can help get down these health disparities, particularly where people are suffering so much because of their insecurities.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Just real quickly, thank you for showing us a great example how congregations can work together, how an association can work together to support each other.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Eddie. In fact, I'm going to be in North Carolina in a couple of weeks. Maybe I'll look you up.
I'll take you to a good restaurant.
Okay, sounds good. And now thank you so much for all this wonderful sharing and narrative and the authenticity of it all. And we're going to go now to Pennsylvania, where my friend, Reverend Amelia, is going to tell us a little bit about her area.
Good afternoon. I'm Reverend Amelia Price. I serve with the good people of St. Paul's, Verdilla, United Church of Christ. The post office says we're in Selinsgrove. That's in Snyder County. It's about an hour north of our capital, Harrisburg. As some of my fellow panelists said, my church is also the stuff of postcards and wall prints. We're nestled along a winding country road. Behind and beside us are cornfields, last year anyway. Yes, we are in an agricultural area also. Those fields, those around us anyway, are carefully cared for by old order Mennonite farmers. When you stand in our small parking lot, you can see for 5 miles. The hills are green and rolling, and the valleys are bursting. Evangelism looks different here. We've been serving this area for almost 200 years. We began as St. Paul's Reformed Church, and some of our families can trace their genealogy all the way back to those founding mothers and fathers. Some of the things we do well: we are a praying church. We pray over a long list that reaches into our surrounding communities, into our surrounding counties, and out into the world. We are a church that cherishes hospitality. COVID has hit us hard. It has been 2.5 years since we could eat together, and we miss it. And we are a family church in the best definition of that term. Most of the people I serve of a Sunday morning are related, and they can tell you exactly how. And they love explaining that to this Pennsylvania transplant. That's the glowing and the happy side of rural ministry in a rural community in the central part of Pennsylvania. Some of the harder realities have already been talked about by my fellow panelists. One big one: we are in an extremely underserved internet area. We have 0 internet access at St. Paul's, Verdilla. We can barely make a cell phone call. There's one about 5 cubic foot place where I can send a text, and it might go out. Like some of our other congregations, we don't have a lot of people, but we have 40 on our rolls. and about 30 of them are usually in worship. We too don't have many children. We have mostly people over the age of 60. Some days I'm 64 and I'm the youngest person there. It's an issue that is complex and varied. Some of it has to do with farms that have been sold, people who have left to find work elsewhere, some who stayed, mostly from at least 2 generations before me, stayed because they worked the farms, the mills, the factories, the mines. But those aren't here anymore. One of the significant things about rural ministry has already been enumerated by my colleagues here. It is about community and community connections. The little place where our building stands is a community, and it's called Verdilla. Now it's just farm fields, 1 rental house, some scattered homes, and our church. But my congregation can point to where the school was. It's now our fellowship hall. They can point to where the general store was and where the post office was. They can tell you who owned what farm and what they raised. And they can talk about their history and why it matters and why it needs to be remembered. Some of that expresses what my colleague Trudy talked about, that it is a wide breadth of understanding. And we too have managed, mostly among competing theologies and politics and ideologies, to stay connected, to stay related. But there is an embedded fear. And that fear raises its head when we realize we too have no children. The children that are there have gone elsewhere for work. And if we want to be around when our grandchildren need a church, there are things we have to recognize and examine and wrestle with. As has also been said, rural churches like St. Paul's Verdilla is the backbone and are the majority of our beloved UCC. But like so many of them, Verdilla is hurting. There is a fear, and we feel somewhat alone. Some of that is they feel the world that they knew slipping away. And like so many of us, we can't envision what's just over the horizon. But my greatest joy has already been talked about. How we pull together, especially to serve our children. We too have a backpack program for weekends and summer and holidays. We bring in boxes of backpacks full of food that these children can eat so that they have something to eat until school starts on Monday, or until the holiday is over, or until we come back. At Christmas time, Children and Youth Services gives us as many families as they can. And us little church, we collect toys and books and clothes and bedding and blankets. And we wrap each and every one in the brightest, fanciest paper we can find, so that these children and families can have Christmas. Even during COVID, we made sure that those children did not miss out. And now, in the midst again of war in Europe, they can't wait to do something for the people of Ukraine and the millions of refugees who have lost everything. So my joy and my sorrow are mixed. I see potential and I see roadblocks. I see promise and debilitating fear. I see God among us, and I see hope that as we all try to find our way into a future we can hardly imagine, that these good people and their history, their community, can be a foundation and a resting place as we move into whatever God has for us next. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Pastor Amelia, for raising the voice. Know that the voices of small Verdelia, of hope and perseverance, and resilience is being heard around the world. Thank you for your wonderful words. And in your same state, it's my pleasure to invite Reverend Barbara.
Hello, and thank you. Thank you so much. I am the pastor of Dilly Parish, which is the only UCC within the Penn Northeast Conference of 129 churches. And the closest UCC to us is, I believe, about 3 hours out. So we really are rural, and we really do feel a little bit alone. If I were to talk about the demographics of the area, we live in a borough which boasts about 200 or so people total. We are on Main Street, and so we have the pleasure of at least being seen by everyone that rides through town. The closest Walmart is about 45 miles. And you can easily get to New York within about 30 minutes, called Vestal. And so our demographics looks like cows, looks like vineyards with grapes, looks like bears, looks like deer, lots of snow. And here I am in rural PA. I am a dual standing pastor, and I am honored to be so, both Baptist and UCC. But I want to begin my talk about talking about my joy of serving rural ministry. And I began by quoting a quote, taking a quote from Ruth Duck, who writes in her Worship for the Whole People of God, that worship is the work of the people that calls for a particular kind of guidance from a congregation's ordained and elected leaders. She writes that to guide is neither to make liturgy a performance that the people only watch, nor to dominate all the words and actions, but rather to care for what happens. I love that. So that the congregation can participate with heart, mind, soul, and strength. I've extended that definition because she seems to be focused more on liturgy. And I've expanded that to include that worship is not only what we do on Sunday, but how we live into this gathering that culminates or climaxes, if you will, daily. And I do believe that she's right on this, that it is the work of the people. She's right on this, that my definition kind of expands that. It's so that the congregation, everyone, can participate with their whole heart, with their mind, soul, and strength. She does not make reference to size, and I love that, and that is my joy. And so the joy for me is that I believe when this happens, when that definition expanded happens, that we look like the church in the Bible in Acts 2:42 through 47. And I just want to emphasize some words in that part of the pericope. All the believers were together, had everything in common, sold property, possessions to give everyone who needed. Every day they continued to meet together. They broke bread in homes. They ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God, enjoying favor of all the people. And then the Lord added to the church those that should be saved. I love that it says all. I love that it says together. And I think of this, and if I would sum all of that up, I would call rural communities allness. I don't know if that's a word, but I call it allness. In a rural small community, it's very personal. and it's very visible. There is this inherent feeling of community. It's a natural sense of community, a familiarity that you can't buy, you can't package. It's innate. It exists. It's congenital. It's hereditary, and that is a joy to serve there. I have served at churches all over the world, and all of them larger than the one I serve at now. And it took a lot to just get us to know one another, to be in community with one another. And one of the joys that I have in serving at Dilley is that it's innate, it's automatic. And some of us who've been talking, we all shared some of the same small mentality, but I believe that although our size is small, that we serve a big God. Some have purported that it's harder for us to develop that in larger churches when I talk to pastors, and that's because most of the members in those churches are transient. That is not the case in rural. They live in the community. And so I believe that in the rural community, one of my joys is that it looks like the ministry of Jesus. Because I believe that Jesus's ministry was quantifiable. Like you knew exactly what he did. You knew exactly who he did it for. You knew exactly what their illnesses were. You even knew their family. Jesus had that kind of ministry. And I call that quantifiable. And I love that about rural ministry. When Jesus healed people, we knew who he healed. We know some folk he healed, they had blindness, some had issues of blood. It is quantifiable. And I find that same quantifiable ministry in rural ministry. My point is only that the rural ministry shows up like the ministry of Jesus. You know who you're helping, you know what their needs are, and that to me is the joy of it all. And for the Dillard Parish, that's a great deal of joy. We have notable mentions this year that although we have a little bit of children, we have a vacation Bible school that brings all of the community together. As far away as 30 minutes, 45 minutes. We have had the fire department know that we are having church outside in the summer. It reduces our bills. So they've even gone and dedicated a tent to us. We've gone even further away to partner with the local pharmacy so that we can make convenient the COVID shop for those. And all of this just to say that Dilley has been community. Our oldest member is 99 years old, and the thing that she keeps me on point with is telling me that technology is a blessing. Just keep going. Now, here's a woman that they didn't even have like real little typewriters in her when she was coming up, but she wants us to keep going. But when you're in this social location that we are, it's a very conservative county. And there are other churches. We have not been able to partner with them, and being so far away from the other UCC churches, that's one of our challenges. Because in this whole allness, the church does know that it is a part of a larger church, yet they don't see them. And it's one thing in community and small and rural, they need to see you. They need to feel you. They need to know you. And so I call that the ministry of presence. It's my hope that the larger church finds a way to be present, to be physically there. And so I believe Maya Angelou said, you can, whatever you do for someone or whatever, it's not that important as how you made that person feel. And I think that's one of the challenges for us, is to be in community with the larger church, to be physically in those same places, in the ministry of presence, just actually being there. I think also our other challenge is the technology. although we are on Facebook, we are having meetings, we are doing those kinds of things, there is a generation that really sees church differently. I looked at the Pew and Gallup polls, and that suggests that people are falling away from the church. It suggests that they are not believing in God, and I believe that we have to reach them. I think technology is the way to reach them. On this Generation Z, the baby boomers, that's a way to reach them. For that, we need extra funding so that we can make it secure, that we can make it consistent, and not going in and out, so that we don't lose them. And I think that maybe the church is being redefined. We are a small church, but we serve a big God, and we can serve
Amen.
and be a part
Amen.
of a bigger
Amen.
community.
Amen.
And I believe if we just focus on being that church, that the last part of that scripture says that the Lord will add to the number the same that shall be saved. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Pastor Barbara. What you were saying reminds me of a book I just read, was William Herzog's Prophet and Teacher, using Jesus as prophet and teacher, and the role of the small community, the agriculture, the rural influence of the early roots of Jesus' ministry. So you were right on right there. Thank you so much. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for letting me voice
Thank
it.
you, sir. Thank you.
So from Pennsylvania, we get to go up to Vermont. Last but not least, my dear friend, Reverend Amanda, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you, Roberto, and other panelists. It all rings so true, everything everyone has been saying. I'm the Reverend Amanda Swoyer, and I serve the North Pomfret Church in Vermont, in North Pomfret, Vermont. A little perspective, the population of North Pomfret is 453 with a median age of 54, and we are 97% white. Vermont has lost most of its agriculture to tourism. So we're relying on people who come from other places a lot of the time for income. My church, like many Vermont churches, is not only rural, but small. We're located on a paved road in the country where there's really no surrounding town. Like some of you have said before, there's a post office and a few single-family dwellings nearby. The town's elementary school on the other side of town recently folded into a school in a nearby town because the demographic is changing. There are a number of seasonal homes in Vermont owned by people who live and work in the cities like Boston and New York and just come to Vermont for ski weekends or summer vacations. During COVID, people were trying to get out of the cities, so even more homes in Vermont sold to people from out of state who will be part-time residents. New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Vermont, and Maine are the least religious states in the United States, according to the most recent poll I could find. And I would point out that although people identify with a religion, that does not mean they attend church. Even though they value the little church in town, they don't necessarily attend it or support it in any real way. Most of our active members commute from surrounding towns now to our church, and one couple drives about 40 minutes. Now in Vermont, that's kind of extraordinary because it's not that big of a state. So they're crossing several towns to get to us. All of the towns around us have churches, and all but one has a UCC church. The white steeple churches are very common here. Nearly every town in Vermont has a church because these towns were, when they were settled, they built a meeting house in the center of town. And when taxes stopped contributing to the upkeep of churches and other buildings were built to be used as town halls and offices, and people started getting jobs out of town, this changed the nature of these rural communities and the need for churches as the center of people's social lives. Nearly every small town still has a church or two, and none of them really want to give up, but we don't necessarily have the population to support them. We may have 40 members on our rolls, but regular attendance is declining. During COVID, our numbers have dipped and they're even lower right now as people are starting to get back to other activities. They actually picked up a little bit while we were doing Zoom and brought people in from other places. Now we're doing hybrid worship, but people are getting on with their lives and things are changing yet again. There are some people who don't use computers well, don't have long distance phone service. I drove around to deliver worship materials to people each week during COVID. There's no cell service at the church, as some of you have also shared that rural communities are like that. We have a nursing home who started Zooming to church with us from a nearby town, which is wonderful and kind of amazing, but they haven't been able to stay connected recently because the internet is just the way it is. Our building was built in 1844 after the previous building burned. And some of the thinking is as old as the church. And when the numbers are small, there's little to balance that out. We originally took part in starting housing and food assistance, starting an organization that provides housing and food assistance in the area with 2 other churches a long time ago. And that just keeps growing, providing housing for homeless people or people who are in transition, and one of the largest food shelves in the area. And our church is a big supporter of that. Our people are welcoming, but they still struggle to understand or accept becoming an O&A church. And I think in some of our small rural churches, we move kind of in baby steps, because when you have so few people, you can't afford to split your church. And I think it's more important to be patient and educate people to try to bring them with us rather than cut them out with quick decisions. Like so many of you have said, we have people all across the political spectrum in our church. A blessing and a curse, as some of you have indicated, of small rural churches is often total lack of anonymity. Everyone knows everyone and people look after each other, and everyone knows everyone and tends to know each other's business. And small rural churches may find it hard not to be overzealous about inviting new people to get involved. It's harder to just show up and attend worship in a small community and remain anonymous. We have coffee hour after worship and like to be social and get to know each other. As you've all indicated, rural church is often about relationships. Even the people who do not attend worship know the pastor and want you to be there should they ever need you. Pastoral care is very important, especially to our older members. Our church families kind of expect you to take care of their extended family members sometimes too. And many people in town claim you as their church, even if the only time they were ever in the building was for a wedding or a funeral. The people in town value the picturesque little white steepled building, so they may support us financially during capital campaigns. We're really blessed that way in our community. Our church has sponsored an annual strawberry supper for many years that brings people from Pomfret as well as surrounding towns. It involves people from the church and town and is less about fundraising and more about community building. Many of our rural churches in our area sponsor community meals and often free community meals. During COVID, we hired a couple guys who played oldies and folk music and had a little concert in someone's backyard, and we invited people to bring a blanket and a picnic. Those are things that you can do in a rural church. I'm a mentor and friend with the pastor of a new church start in a nearby town that is offering non-traditional UCC church, which is drawing in previously non-churched people and those who have been wounded by church. They call themselves Love Church, and they meet at the pastor's home for a forest meditation and some discussion every Saturday morning, even in the winter, except for the days that were like 25 below, gathering around a fire pit and talking after their time in the forest. They're doing book studies in yoga church and occasional dinner church. We've done breakfast church in our church, where you meet around a table and have discussions during worship. And it's wonderful. Our small rural churches need to be creative to stay vital these days. But Jesus said, where two or more are gathered in his name, he's there also. Thank you all. It's been a joy to be with you.
Thank you, Pastor Amanda, for showing us examples of a resilient church and innovative ways, creative ways, but the importance of relationships always comes first. Relationship with one another in love. So with that, Reverend Amanda from Vermont, Reverend Amelia and Reverend Barbara from Pennsylvania, Reverend Eddie from North Carolina, Reverend Meg and Miss Trudy and Reverend Jim from Montana, and last but not least, Miss Becky from South Dakota. Thank you for lifting up the voices of our UCC rural and small town congregations and narratives. And I ask you, those who are watching, to keep our UCC rural and small town congregations in your prayers. Support them in any way that you feel. Get to know them. Get to know us, because we're all one family of God. So thank you for joining us today in this special program on UCC Rural Voices. And to close us off, I'm going to invite Reverend Amelia Price to give us the benediction.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we thank you for the creativity and the wisdom, the creative juices and the willingness to try, the community, the relationships, the connections, the good land, and the creatures that we share it with. Gracious God, bless our small churches. Bless our pastors and our members, our hardworking people and their families, as we are your body in this world, in these times, and for times such as these. Bless the people of Ukraine and all who need you this day. Amen.
Amen.
Dear friends in Christ, if this conversation has moved you, if what's been offered here has enhanced your ministry or healed your soul in any way, please consider donating to support the annual fund of the United Church of Christ. Simply text UCC to 41444. Your support will help build more programs like this. We thank you for your support. Be blessed and be a blessing, and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.